One of the most vivid experiences of my life that I can remember is the transition from primary school to secondary school. And when we were in primary school, we always used to refer to secondary school as big school. And obviously, once you start at secondary school, you don't call it that anymore because you think you're too cool. But the first day at big school, I think, is something that we all remember. So this is my poem called Big School. In a sprawling concrete universe, a labyrinth of corridors where everybody knows the way, all except for me. Every classroom's in disguise, every corner is a mystery. I got lost after geography, and now I'm late for history. My cheeks resemble beetroots, my books are heavy as bronze. I fight for breath whilst older kids just glide about like swans. Teachers tap their watches, they sigh and roll their eyes. But this school is like a city, deep and vast as summer skies. One by one, the other kids are joining queues and talking, but I'm completely clueless as to whereabouts I'm walking. I know they call it big school, but these buildings are gigantic. It's super chilled at break time, but after bell it's frantic. And these posters could be hieroglyphs. They make no sense to me. The stairs go on forever, and I'm late for lesson 3. I've got my pencil case, my planner, my lunchbox, and my books, but still I'm feeling paranoid from all the funny looks.
Can you give any advice to someone wanting to write and publish poetry?
First of all, the best way to become a better writer is to read more. So read as much as you can. Try and read out of your comfort zone. Try and read poetry from as many different eras, as many different backgrounds, as many different countries as you can. And just try and really broaden your horizon. The more that you read and the wider that you read, the better you'll become at writing, and the more equipped you'll be to develop as a writer. And the advice that I'd give to somebody wanting to publish poetry is to try and be as patient as is humanly possible. When you've finished writing a poem, you always want to put it online straight away. You always want to publish it straight away. And more often than not, you end up deleting it and regretting it. So just be patient when you're wanting to publish it. In terms of wanting to publish a collection, like a book, again, be as patient as you can. It takes a couple of years at least to build a body of work that somebody would potentially want to publish. So just focus more on your development as a writer, as opposed to like the end result of having a book or whatever. Because as exciting as that is, you've got to focus much more on your development. So read as much as you can and take your time with your writing.
Is writing your full-time career, or would you like it to be?
Writing is my full-time career. It has been since late 2015. I'd been working on a professional level as a writer before then. I actually started off with a music career, and then did a couple of other jobs in my mid-20s before switching my focus back to writing. It took me a few years of being paid as a writer before I could make the transition to being a full-time writer. Unfortunately, I've managed to sustain it just about since then. That involves all kinds of things. So I think most people assume that you just sit at home all day in your dressing gown and write, which is not true. So I do work in schools. I perform at events around the country. I sometimes write commissions for organisations. I try and sell books. So I do all manner of things, really, but they're all related to poetry or writing in some way. So yes, I'm very fortunate. Writing is my full-time career, and hopefully I'll manage to keep it that way for a while.
If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
I would say determined, political, and relatable. I say determined because I try and work as hard as I can every single day to develop my craft and to sustain a living as a writer. It's a difficult thing to do when you freelance, but I am as determined as I can to make the most of the opportunity that I've been given and the privilege that I've got. Political because everything I do is sort of informed by politics in some way, including my writing. Probably the main aim of my writing is to address certain social and political issues. And even down to like talking about empathy in primary school to talking about like global events. So I am very politically driven, which is an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. And then relatable, which funnily enough, relatable is actually seen as a bit of a bad word in the poetry world. Relatable is often a backhanded compliment because people think that if you're relatable, it means that your work is too basic and simplistic. But I think that is wrong because I think that everybody should be able to access poetry, and for it to be relatable to somebody who isn't massively well versed in poetry, I think is Very important so that people could hear themselves reflected in poetry. So determined, political, and relatable.
What do most well-written poems have in common?
They instantly make you feel at home, whilst also providing a window into a world that is completely new to you. So, in that moment, whether it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, you are living in this world that the poet has created. And if that world is something you can instantly relate to, that's brilliant. If that world is something that is completely new to you, they can do it in a way that you still feel like you're able to understand it. And that's why you get the empathy and the connection with the poem. If you can read or listen to a poem first time and get something from it, some kind of connection, I think they're the best poems. They're the most well written poems. They shouldn't need any preamble or explanation. They just pull you in as a human being and allow you to experience the moment that the poet's created.
How many books have you written, and which one is your favourite?
I've written 2 books so far, and they are polar opposites. We couldn't be more different. So I've got A Hurricane in My Head, which is poems for when your phone dies. That is targeted at people aged 10 to 14. Poems about playful rebellion and empathy and friendship and school life and home life. And then I've also got a book called Two Little Ducks, which is for grown-ups, and it is about the working class leave vote in the EU referendum, the Calais jungle and the refugee crisis, and some kitchen sink realism. So they are 2 very different books. It's difficult to pin, difficult to say which one is my favourite. But if I had to choose, I would say A Hurricane in My Head, because the idea that young people might read and enjoy my poetry and feel inspired by it is the best feeling in the world. So I would say A Hurricane in My Head.
What is the message of the poem?
Well, the beauty of poetry is that it can contain any number of messages. So you will always see poems exchanged on Valentine's Day and on Mother's Day. You'll always see poems read at weddings and read at funerals. You see poems at political rallies. You see poems in nurseries when it's like a funny nursery rhyme. You can see poems. Poems can have absolutely any message. And that's what I really love about a poem. They can serve so many. It can serve so many purposes. They can bring so many messages, evoke so many emotions. A poetry can be absolutely anything that you want it to be. And also, a poem doesn't even have to have a message. It can just be a play on words. It can be just a really silly story. It can be whatever you want. So basically, a poem can have whatever message you want it to have. How come they're so popular, so good at making friends? I bet they're all just lonely too. I bet they just pretend. I find it hard to swallow that everyone knows the way. It's a maze the size of Mexico, which changes every day. It's a Rubik's Cube of half familiar landmarks in my mind. And why are the scariest teachers the most difficult to find? How on earth will I ever get a single GCSE when everybody knows the way, all except for me?